Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Can you hear me? Hmm, Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Going to wait a little bit for people to come in. Anyone else wants to join? And if you are catching the replay, welcome as well. Feel free to put a comment below. Let me know where you're calling in from or where you're watching in from. Calling in. Maybe I'll do calls eventually one day on the pod. Let me know where you're watching from, how your day has been, how your week has been, all the things. All the things. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in. If you're tuning in, let me know how you're doing, where you're tuning in from before we get started. It is Friday Eve, and I'm excited about it. Get started in another minute or so. Please leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. How are you doing on this Thursday evening? Y'all talk back to me. Talk back to me. I see the numbers growing. I see them growing. How y'all doing? How you feeling? Who's watching? Who's with me today, this Thursday evening? How y'all doing? Hello. Oh, that number jumped up. Hey y'all. How y'all doing? How y'all doing? Please comment if you're subscribed, if you've been subscribed for a while. How are you doing? See the hearts. Thank y'all for the hearts. How are y'all doing? Oh, thank you. How y'all doing? I can't see any other comments. I can't see any other comments. I wonder if I can view it on this other screen. How y'all doing? I see all the emojis. Just want to make sure I'm not missing any comments. Okay, y'all. Well, happy Thursday again. I am going to go ahead and get started. Again, I hope y'all have had a great Thursday. Thank y'all so much. My birthday was last week. Thank you for the birthday love for those who sent their love, their prayers, their comments, and all the like. It was definitely a rest, a refuel, a reset for me. Finally 30. I feel very blessed to make it to the age of 30. Um, the Lord has been kind in this season, I should say. And I know this isn't traditionally how I do my podcast episodes. And I know you guys, you've been sticking with me for a while as we've been going through different transitions and how I would like the show to be moving forward. So I said that I would want to do more live content, and I am holding up my end of the bargain on that. So for YouTube and everything, and everyone will get this episode eventually. But thank y'all so much again for all of your support. So I did not, like I said, I my intention was to do a regular episode this week, but the Lord changed my plans. The way this week has been going, everything has sort of been kind of just crushing in a bit. So I was forced to pivot. I was forced to pivot. And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. I'm glad you're here because we're going to be talking about pivoting, which is something that is very real for a lot of us. It can be very difficult. And when you're pivoting in seasons and when you have plans and the plans don't work out and all the things. And this isn't just about like career or business or ministry necessarily. It could really be about anything, any time that God causes you to pivot. God led pivots, where we are having to pivot our faith and pivot our steps and our walks. So that's what we're going to be talking about today is pivoting with faith and how we should respond when God directs us to pivot, what our response should be, what it should look like, how do we shift, how do we change? And when God does change our plans, what do we do? Do we stay rooted in our faith, or do we react and act out when plans change abruptly or suddenly? So we're going to talk about it. We are going to talk about it. So the first thing I wanted to do was to break down what pivot was and what certain definitions of pivot are for me, and certain definitions that I think would help us hone in on this. So let's define pivot. And three definitions: adjustment or modification, structured course correction, or like when you see in sports where it's one foot is firmly placed and another foot is moving in order to maintain balance or control. And those are definitions that I really like for pivot because it encapsulates how I think God wants us to view pivoting, modifying to scale or to get more balance, control over a situation, to prepare us for another move, So I really like the visualization of a basketball team and a player who is dribbling. They're having to pivot their body in a way so that they can create space when they're in a limited position. So pivoting is all about when you are limited, how you maneuver when you're in a limited position, you know? So that's really good for me. And I have definitely been in a pivot season. Like I was telling you guys, I know I know that a lot of us are in that season. And honestly, the pivot has been making me cranky. Like I've been in a season where I wanted to like low key, high key, like crash out, y'all. Like I'm not even gonna lie. And I've questioned God about why I've had to pivot in certain directions and why certain things have had to be in different ways. And I realize a lot of it is because pivoting applies pressure. And it is a form of pressure that God uses to bring certain things out of us or to show us really what is inside of us, right? And so that is going to bring me to my first point. Pivoting exposes what you gravitate towards. So let's read Genesis 12 and 1. I'm going to go to it right now. So Genesis 12 and 1 says, Now the Lord said to Abram, Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. Okay, so Genesis 12 and 1. God tells Abraham at that point, he was called Abram, leave your country, leave your people, and your father's house, and go to the land that I have shown you, that I've told you about. So he doesn't even know where he's going yet. Like God doesn't tell him where, that's not revealed. But Abraham moves anyway. And that is the pivot. That's where the pivot is revealed. And in that, we can see that Abraham gravitated towards not comfort, not familiarity, whatever that is, but he gravitated towards obedience, right? And I think that says a lot because if you read Genesis, like Abraham wasn't even raised by believers. Like he wasn't raised in a place where people were glorifying God, and yet he knew he had the faith to go along with what the Lord had commanded him to do. So his comfort and his familiarity would have been to go along with like what his daddy's family had been believing, right? To not follow the voice of God. Yet he had to pivot to what the voice of God was telling him to do. So he had to deny what was comfortable. He had to deny what was familiar for him in order for him to go and seek the promise that God had for him. Hey y'all, how y'all doing? Welcome. Welcome, welcome. I saw a couple more people hop in. How y'all doing? So that poses the question for me, when God calls you to pivot, what do you gravitate towards? What do you reach for? Do you fight the pivot or do you reach for comfort? Or do you carry the discomfort with you as you walk in obedience? And that's what we see that Abraham did. He carried his discomfort with him. But even he still chose to walk in obedience, whatever that looked like for him. He had to leave everything that was familiar, his homeland, his father's land. He did take Lot at first, right? Which was his only attachment, his only tie to what was familiar and comfortable. But even later, we know that he still had to distance himself from Lot. He had to separate himself from Lot because, like the Lord said, you have to leave everything behind. But still, like, why do we do that? Like, why did he why did he still choose to take him along knowing that the Lord told him to leave behind everything? So we can say, Abraham, well, you should have just left Lot because he caused a lot of issues for you, right? But a lot of us are like that. We have enough faith, but we're like, oh, well, wait, Lord, like I'm going to keep that one thing around that's still familiar for me. And we have to ask ourselves, why do we do that? Is it out of convenience? Really? Like, is it out of comfort? Really? And honestly, for me, I think it's control. I think it's based out of control because if we can keep this one thing, if we can tweak this one part of our lives, and that means that I can control a certain outcome of my life, I can control at least this one thing in my life. For me, that's my story. I don't know about anybody else. Y'all can leave a comment, let me know if it's you. But not allowing God to be the full author of my story. It's like, Lord, you can come in and make some edits here or there, but like really all the writing credits belong to me. And I'm gonna publish it the way I want to publish it too. And we have to remember that God is the author of our stories, and we have to allow God to be the author of our stories in completion, whatever that looks like. We don't have to control everything. We have to relinquish what that control is. So while I was reading and studying and thinking about what I wanted to talk about, the Lord downloaded some things to me. And He said that there are different ways that we all respond to pivoting. And that is four. And we're going to go into all of these. So some of us panic, right? Some of us are prepared. Some of us procrastinate. And there are others of us who chase perfectionism. And we're going to break this down. And I thought Abraham was a good example to follow for this because he is like the father of our faith, right? But even he struggled with pivoting at certain points. And he has great examples of what it looks like to pivot in his life because Abraham was literally like a nomad at certain points of life, right? Like he just had to pitch wherever God told him to pitch. Like, and he just got up and gathered everything, his whole family, his his immediate family, his descendants, whatever, and was like, well, go in this land, go in that land, take your wife here, take your servants there, all of that, right? So we can learn a lot from Abraham and his story. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the panic in the pivot, and that is from Genesis 12 through 13. So a famine hits the land where Abraham is, and what does he do? Out of his response, what does he do? He panics. He panics and he goes to Egypt, right? In that time in Egypt, he takes his wife at the time, whose name is Sarai. We know her to be Sarah now. But he takes his wife and he tells the Egyptians, he tells the king that Sarah is his sister and not his wife. Why does he do that? To protect himself because he was afraid. Panicked. He panicked, and his panic led to a lie. His panic led to a lie. And also, it placed him out of alignment with God's protection. And that's literally what panicking does when we lie out of fear. And that's exactly what it is. Panic are fear-based decisions. They're not faith-based decisions. They lead us to a place that then leaves us out of the will of God. So Abraham used his own logic and his own emotions at the time, working out of his emotions the way a lot of us like to do, right? Like I said, crash out, hide in a corner, whatever that may be. He used his own emotions at that time to lead what he was doing instead of operating out of faith and just saying, yes, this is my wife, and believing that God will cover them and protect them because the Lord had already made promises to him, like, hey, like I'm going to give you this land and all of that, like I'm taking you somewhere, I'm leading you someplace. So instead of believing God in that moment that God was going to be sovereign in that moment and cover them, he chose to lie, which led to a whole debacle, right? So our what our lifted reflection is for this section is panic pivots will pull us out of God's will faster than anything else. So when you are in a pivot, you do not want to panic because it is going to take you out of the will of God. If anything, we need to be allowing pivots to lead us towards peace because we know that anywhere that there's peace, God is, and God does not want us to operate out of a place of panic at all, ever. Second thing is the prepared pivot. So remember, some of us panic, but some of us are prepared, and we're going to talk about what that looks like. So let's set the scene. At this point, Abraham and Lot were separated. Lot was in Sodom and Gomorrah. Abraham was in his own lands at that time. And there were some kings that took over Sodom and Gomorrah. And Lot had been taken by these kings, and also the people that were in their towns and all of their treasures and everything like that. So Abraham got word that Lot was taken, and he trained his men. He took trained men with him to go and get his relative back, and to go in and fight for the people that had been wrongfully, persecuted and were stolen from these kings. So he went to battle. He took what he had and he went to battle, and he was successful because he got his relative back. And that points us to what preparation looks like. So being spiritually and mentally and emotionally ready to respond. It wasn't like a reaction, it was a response out of something that had been done to them, right? So again, a lot of us try to operate out of a place of we have to have this perfect plan or this perfect narrative in order for God to fight with us, for us, and on our behalf. But that's really not the case, right? God just really wants us to be prepared, which Abraham was. He had done the separation at that point. He had done the work at that point, right? And God allowed him to go and fight with his people to help protect his family. And after this part in scripture, I don't think it's coincidental if you read the following parts after in Genesis 14. After Abraham goes and gets Lot back and everything, he gets his blessing from Melchizedek, who is a priest. And I don't think it's coincidence that it happens after that, right? Like Melchizedek blesses Abraham after he goes to war and defends his family, his nephew. And I think that's like a lot of us because it shows that God had honored his fight. It shows that God honored his obedience. And not saying that God necessarily was like, yes, go defend your family and everything like that. But the fact that Abraham had been obedient and faithful in the separation, God blessed his steps, right? And I think that can go a long way for all of us because we're waiting for the thing, not realizing that the blessing is on the other side of us doing that thing. Again, our next lifted reflection is, what are you doing right now to be prepared for what God might bless you with next? It may be on the other side. Good morning, Sabrina. Well, it's evening here, but good morning. How you doing? So the next thing we have is procrastination. So some of us panic, some of us are prepared, others of us procrastinate, and that is tied to Genesis 16, right? So a lot of us know Abraham because of Isaac and the whole story with Isaac and Sarah laughing, and we're gonna get into all that. But the Lord promised Abraham and Sarah a son. They promised, he promised them a child, but years had passed at this point. And instead of trusting God's timing, Abraham and Sarah chose to make their own plan. Enter Hagar, right? Enter Hagar, enter Ishmael, enter Elroy, the God who sees, and procrastination. Procrastination can look like we're waiting, but really it's like a hesitation that is dressed up. So I know it can look like, okay, well, they didn't procrastinate because they weren't doing anything. Their faith was procrastinated, though, if we really think about it, because a lot of us are waiting on God when our procrastination is towards the pivot. So it's like their faith is the thing that had to pivot. Their mindset was the thing that had to pivot. It was the thing that was holding them up from the promise. So their faith was being tried and tested at that time. And the pivot was to the mind. The pivot was to their faith, was to their hearts. Like, okay, God said these things, but is this really going to happen? Their faith had to pivot. Their mindset had to pivot. So the delay that we experience, it might not be a physical or a tangible misstep, right? It might not be you didn't do A, B, C. It might not be you didn't do one, two, or three. It could be misplaced faith. Your procrastination could be misplaced faith. It could just be that you're not believing God for the thing that He said that He would do. So instead of continuing to trust God, they delayed themselves even further by creating a plan of their own with Hagar and Ishmael. And again, that delay brought a lot of drama, a lot of drama that still it's still prevalent today, right? So from this we learn that procrastination and pivoting leads to consequences that will linger. They will linger. So I want to encourage you with this lifted reflection that just because God is silent, that doesn't mean that you need to stall. When He says to move, then you need to move. When He says to believe, then you need to believe. We need to believe. That brings us to our fourth step, perfectionism. So again, some of us panic, some of us are prepared, some of us procrastinate. There are those of us who chase perfection. We chase perfectionism. And that is me. I'm a recovering perfectionist. I will say it. The Lord has been kind. I'm so much better. And I know a lot of us are too. But this pulls from Genesis 17. So again, God reaffirms the fact that He is going to give Abraham and Sarah a son. We know about Sarah laughing, but do we forget that Abraham laughed too? Like Abraham was legit like, is it possible for a 100-year-old man and a 90-some-year-old woman to conceive a child? And he laughs at God. He laughs. And then he still wanted the promise through Ishmael because he says in Genesis 17 and 18, if only Ishmael was acceptable to you, God, if only he was acceptable to you. Why did he say that? Why did he say that? His faith, right? And it's because he wanted the promise in his way, like we all do. We want to believe that the promise is going to come through in the way that we want it to, right? Sometimes we are so married to how we imagine things, the promise that we wanted to create, the promise that we wanted to come to pass, that we resist God's pivot when He says He wants to do something different. We idolize our ideas, we idolize our desires, the things that we want. And really, like, God don't need our plans. He don't need our ideas. He gives them to us. That's cool. Like, but we have to trust that He does not need them in order to orchestrate His will for our life. He really don't. Like, God don't really need our help in that. He already has a will. He already has a plan for your life. And if you want to live in that will, all you have to do is consult Him and have active faith and believe that it's going to come to pass in your life. But He doesn't need you to be giving Him ideas and plans on your life. He's already orchestrated that. He needs your trust, but He doesn't need your perfection, your perfect plan, whatever that may look like. Because oftentimes perfection is just pride in disguise. It's a thing that we don't like to admit. We don't like to admit when we get things wrong. We don't like to admit when we made a misstep, when things, when we don't have everything figured out. When we don't have everything figured out, we don't like to admit that. We really don't. And often we will miss out on God's pivot when we are so focused on what our perfect timeline looks like, what our perfect insert word here looks like. I encourage you here. Don't miss out on God's pivots because you're obsessed with perfection. God's pivots don't need your perfection, just your participation and your willingness to trust Him when the plan changes. That's all He needs. That's all he needs. And I know it can be easier said than done when it comes to pivoting and what that looks like. So I thought about this a while ago. What does pivot looks like? Because the Lord will call us to pivot sometimes. Sometimes we'll just sit with the word pivot and we're like, Lord, like, what does that mean? What does that mean for me? What does that mean for my life? And there are some ways that God will lead you to pivot. And I wrote some down. So it could be upscaling when God increases your capacity for a thing, right? So for Abraham, he God told him that he would become the father of many nations. So that means that his capacity for certain things had to increase. His leadership, his faith, absolutely upscaling. Even if it's not, obviously none of us are the father of many nations, but if God is increasing your capacity for work, or if you're stewarding over something, if he's called you to steward over your business or your workplace or your family, um, upscaling looks like preparing for the more that he's about to give you. So he told Abraham, I'm going to make you the father of many nations. So that means that your descendants, your lineage is going to depend on the faith that you have. So your faith has to escalate in a way that is going to travel through generations. So, what is God calling you to upscale that is going to also travel through generations, or that's going to take you through multiple seasons? The thing that's it's going to be built upon, upscale. So it starts at a ground level, and if you need to upscale something, that means that it has to start from somewhere. So, what is God going to give you? What does He need you to upscale? So that you can keep ascending for seasons and multiple seasons to come. And so that looks like structure. Again, there's a foundation, there's a bottom level. That looks like stewardship. That looks like support. There has to be an upkeep. There has to be pillars that are helping you to support to upscale whatever it is that you're doing, that you're building, that he has you building. It's also downscaling because not everything that we think that we need do we really need. Okay? God told Abraham, leave everything behind. You don't need it. Now I'm talking to me. Okay? God told Abraham, leave everything behind. You don't need it. You got me. You good. When God removes things, he's removing it to sharpen your focus. God told Abraham to leave Lot, leave his father's house, leave everything behind. Sometimes subtraction is the sanctification that you need. Downscaling. That also makes you think about pruning. Oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Holy Spirit. So pruning is taking away branches, pulling them back. Sometimes you don't need all that. Sometimes you need to break some stuff off in order for new things to bloom, in order for new things to flourish, right? So sometimes downscaling is good. You ever see parents that they're like empty nesters now, and they're like, "Oh, we need to downsize. We don't need all that space no more. We don't need all that room." Like some of us need to downsize some things because why do something bigger trying to keep up with something that you no longer, some of us no longer have the capacity to handle the things that we once did in a prior season. And some of us are just trying to keep up with the Joneses as if, I'm gonna get off that one, but you don't have to force yourself to keep up to a place that you're no longer in. You're no longer in that season. Okay. So sometimes subtraction is sanctification. If God is stripping some things away from you, sometimes it's good. Well, every time he does it is good. Every time he does it is good. Okay. The next thing that can help us strategies for pivoting is reevaluating your resources. What does that look like? So Abraham built altars all throughout his stories in Genesis. You can see where God led him to multiple places, and he would build these altars where God would show himself mighty, where he would make covenants with God and be considered like a friend to God, like all these places where he almost sacrificed his son, where he was going to sacrifice his son. Like he made altars with stones. And that was what they did in the Old Testament with stones. Abraham used simple stones. as a marker, as a remembrance of God met me here. This is when God did this thing for me. That's a resource to remember that, to actively remember that. And it's nothing, it wasn't fancy. Like it was just simple. It was what he had. He used what he had as a remembrance. And we don't need anything fancy. All we need is our faith to help activate the thing, right? All we need is faith. Again, when he went to go save Lot, to rescue Lot, he used the men he had to defeat those kings and to save his relative. Sometimes our resource is people. And some of us can't pivot when God asks us to because we have shut off all access to people. We don't do people, we don't like people, we all peopled out, all of that. But we don't realize that sometimes the blessing is on the other side of the help, or it's on the other side of the partnership. We need people, whatever that looks like for you. We need people. So, those are some strategies: upscaling, downscaling, reevaluating where you are, what your resources are. That includes people. That includes people, y'all. It really does. So, based on that, I got to ask you, where's your pivot response? Like, which one do you identify with? Is it the panicker? Is it the perfectionist? Do you feel prepared? Like, have you been prepared? And I think we can go in and out of all of these in different seasons, right? Are you a procrastinator? I know I'm big on really all of them, honestly. But the Lord is good. Like, he's blessing me, y'all. I'm getting better. But procrastination is a big one for me. Procrastination and perfectionist, for sure. For sure. But which one do you identify with the most? Which response do you mostly gravitate towards? What areas may God be calling you to adjust in? What's still holding you back? Like, what old thing is still holding you back? Because your blessing is always going to be in your obedience, just like we see with Abraham. Even when it's uncomfortable for you, even when it don't feel good, like even when it doesn't make sense, right? Like Abraham obeyed, and because of that, generations were blessed. They really were. And I really want to talk about pivoting because a lot of us see pivoting as the end. Like we see pivoting, and again, that panicky nature sets in. We don't know what to do, and that used to be me. A lot of times, I wasn't prepared for pivots. I thought if a pivot happened, then that means that I did something wrong. And if I was not prepared for a pivot, then that meant that I wasn't enough, that I was a failure, that nothing would turn out right, that nothing would be, insert all the negative thoughts there, right? But I've learned that pivoting is necessary, and it doesn't mean failure. A pivot does not mean failure. It often means that God is bringing you to a place of faith, that He's testing your faith. He's trying to see where your faith is, that God is trying to shift you, but He's not trying to harm you. He's just trying to see what your response is going to be. Is it going to be to sulk? Is it going to be to cry? Is it going to be to crash out? Because honestly, sometimes crashing out looks good. Don't do it, y'all. Like, don't do it for real. But the the pivot is to prepare us. The pivot is to prepare you. And I'll never stress this enough. Like, I'm sure there were times like Abraham had to go about the route to sacrifice his own son, like the son that God had promised him after all this time. He had to walk out what that will look like. And up at the very end, the Lord told him to unhand him. I'm not going to make you do that. I'm not going to make you do that. It was to exercise faith. It was to exercise faith. It was to exercise his faith. Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this message on this evening. And if it helped you, if it helped any pivots that you have going on in your life right now, or if there's anything stirring in your heart about it, please send it to someone. Please comment below. Let me know how it does for you. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. If you're just tuning in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast. Um, and yeah, if you want to email me, you can. I am Latrice Lifter Up at gmail.com. Also, I'll put in the description the link to my newsletter as well. So I hope you guys have a great evening. I'm going to stay on a couple more seconds just to see if there's any additional comments. Y'all can also leave prayer requests or anything. I'll be checking the comments also after the live. But thank y'all for tuning in. Any questions? I feel like I also like live because I'm able to be on here a little bit longer than on my traditional podcast format. I'm on like a time limit with when I pre-record, I should say. So it's nice sometimes to get out all the thoughts that I have. It really is. All right, you guys. Well, looks like there's no comments so far. Any additional comments? But I love you guys with the love of Christ. Okay. And y'all know what it is. Until next time, remember to stay encouraged.